Good evening. It's Tuesday, the 21st of April at 6 o'clock, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andrea D Woolhead, who has written a non-fiction book, which will come up in conversation. Eric, as you can tell by his background, is sci-fi fantasy. Sarah has her finger in lots of pies, doing all sorts of things, fiction and non-fiction. And so we'll be covering that. And Alastair is like Andy, has written, albeit fiction, inspired by true events. So perfect for this writing, life versus writing topic. Hopefully we'll be joined by Sean Allen at one point, who writes, again, lots of different things: children's, YA, horror, all sorts, poetry, short stories. But for now, I'll ask Andy first, because you are literally life versus writing. And I understand from previous conversations that you'd never really planned to write, maybe dabbled in the past, until this opportunity presented yourself.
Yes, yes. Um, in fact, I have blogged for a long time, and there's an awful lot of my life in those blogs. But it's always a case of if I include anybody else, I always have their permission, and I don't put the sensitive stuff in. I get probably about 500 hits a week on my current blog. So, and it's over six continents. So it's pretty worldwide.
That's really good.
Um, so yeah, so that's my main part of my writing. But sort of writing NASA's story has been sort of one long extended piece of writing about his life and about Syria.
Mm. And did you find when you were talking, I mean, you just said that when you're writing your blog, and that's really how blogs started. It's people talking about themselves, and journals, sort of online journals. Um, did you find when you were talking with NASA that there were things that you didn't want to put in, either for him or for somebody else or for potentially the reader? Were you very selective about what you felt would be appropriate for, because obviously you don't know who's going to read your book, you don't know what age or from which background your readers are going to read his story or your blog.
Yeah. Well, for some people, it's just like people in prison. It was just their given names and not their family names.
Mm.
And those, they could go to almost anybody. So that's something that cannot be traced. And for some of the people who perpetrated sort of really awful things and they were famous for it, they got their full name in
Right,
there.
right.
Um, Ghazali was the person who was one of Assad's henchmen that put his gun to Assad's head.
Mm.
So he gets a good mention in there. But it's a fine line about how much you sort of open up about absolutely everything and whether absolutely everything actually spoils the story and makes it lose focus.
Mm.
So there's sort of lots of decision making about what you put in and what you don't put in and what you allude to.
Mm. Because I suppose also it's what's in the public domain already.
Yeah,
This is very much his story. So
yeah,
if there's a lot covered about the sort of the global aspect of Syria at the time, it's almost you want to keep it personal and things that affected him.
yeah. There's one point in the book, and I it sort of affected me very, very deeply. When he was at school as a young teenager, him and a group of friends got together and they made their own political party of jokers and they were making themselves name cards. And the head teacher reported them to the security police. And by that time, NASA hadn't received his card, so he wasn't carted off and interrogated and taken away from the family for 2 days.
Wow.
And when they finally returned and they came back to the classroom,
Mm.
It was normality. Nobody said anything.
Mm.
And, for me, that I thought that was a really sort of striking thing, that sort of behavior and treatment of young teenagers as being acceptable in a society is
Mm.
horrific.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that was, that was back in the 90s.
yeah, because we are used to the lives we lead, aren't we? And what is acceptable and not acceptable.
Yeah.
Eric, moving to fiction, how much of your life is? I mean, we say we write what we know, and our characters are often have some part of us in the books. How much of yourself and your life do you put in your books?
Probably more than I realize, but I mean, I'll start with the best fiction is about real life, right? Because we want our readers to empathize. We want to touch our readers. You're not going to do that if you're not putting something real in there.
Mm.
In the case of the three books back here, they're very much influenced. That the idea for the first book started with I've spoke about it here before, researching my grandfather and my grandfather's story and deciding I wasn't ready to write it yet. But one of my POV characters is pretty much my grandfather, or at least how I envisioned him when he was in the trenches of World War One.
Mm.
Um, Also, I started with the idea of the invasion in Wells' book, the original War of the Worlds, as kind of a 9/11 type event, and how did it affect politics and the world,
Mm.
the way 9/11 affected the real world, the world we live in. I mean, I think America's rightward shift really started September 12th,
Mm.
2001. And that's kind of how I frame it in the book.
Right.
And also to go back further, if you read what Wells said, he said that the Martians were the British Empire and the people being invaded were various places that the British Empire colonized. That
Wow.
was the metaphor that he was working with when he wrote that book.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Wow.
it's something I end up talking about a lot is certain people who don't like certain things say, well, science fiction shouldn't be political. It's like, have you ever read it?
Yeah.
It is.
But
It
the thing
very
is,
much is.
politics affects every aspect of our lives.
Humans are
What we
political. Yeah.
can and can't do. We drive a car. We are bound by certain rules,
Right.
and so it has to. But you are absolutely right that every fiction or non-fiction, it's got to be relatable. That although in Andy's case, we haven't been in NASA's situation, we can imagine how we would react and how we would
Right.
feel if we are that character, which makes
Right.
reading just fantastic, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, Sarah, you write fiction and non-fiction. I mean,
Um,
obviously, you're writing workbooks, you're writing guides, are your experience and expertise. How do you find with writing? Do you have female characters in all your books? Your main characters are female. Do
yeah,
you take things from life and put them in your
yeah,
books characters?
in a word.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention this one, which is up there. I can never do this, right? It's
Oh,
always back to front,
yeah.
isn't it? I've brought an example of both.
Mm.
For tonight, as you can tell, my voice is still not
Oh,
quite
it's
there.
still
But
not
I'm
there.
getting there.
No. Oh,
Weeks and weeks. Anyway,
no.
in Dream State, which is essentially a romance, but it's got suspense and mystery in it too.
Mm.
And there's it's slightly different from the pair of you actually, Andy and Eric. What I'm bringing to tonight, I hope I've read the brief right,
That's okay.
is that quite a few years ago, about 15 years ago or so, a member of my close family um, was taken ill and put into an induced coma. And it was completely shocking. They're absolutely okay now, and that's that's what I'm holding on to. But there was a part of it that we were taken into A&E and taken into quite a small room and given lots of bad news, and then I'm smiling because it's a happy ending.
Yeah.
And then taken into an even smaller room after a couple of hours where there was more bad news given, and then taken into another very small room. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be in a tiny, tiny room in a minute. We're
Yeah.
going to
With
get
the
out, you know,
with the worst news possible.
with the worst.
Yes.
But inside the tiniest room, a little bit like Alice in Wonderland in that respect, isn't it?
Funny.
Inside the room, the doctor came in and gave us a real rundown of by so many hours, you know, lots of things had happened, and we were given a journal, and we were told that this family member they had no clue how long this coma was going to be for, or indeed what made it happen, apart from them inducing them into the coma.
Yeah.
What exactly happened? So we were all, you know, completely shocked. We didn't know what to do. We were crying every 2 minutes through shock. And they gave us this journal, and they said, for as long as this coma goes on, write your thoughts, your feelings into the journal, and the best possible outcome is that this family member is absolutely okay after however long. And then the missing part is what you've written in this journal. And I thought, oh my God, that, from a writing point of view, oh my gosh, this is a record.
Right.
So I included it in this, which is the main character is an author, and she gets into a car accident. She's in a coma, but while she's in the coma, she's a bit clever because she puts right what has gone wrong in her book that she's not allowed to make right. It's obviously a bit more involved than that.
Yeah.
And I interviewed this family member, and I said, "Are you okay if I do this? Because I need to ask you some questions."
Sure.
What was it like in there? Because I called the book Dream State. So this author is basically inside a dream while this is all happening.
Right.
So I gave, you know, lots of questions and wrote down all the answers. But essentially, inside the coma, not a thing. They don't remember anything about it. From my point of view.
Right. Yeah, but
really make a good story. It's a lot of blank pages.
Well, that's the thing. We can do whatever we like, can't we? But it's. I mean, that's a big inspiration. Sometimes it could be just a something you hear, or a very slight thing that then could create a novel out of that. But I love the idea, and a lot of writers, it's been said many times before, they'll either, and some I know, leave a sentence halfway. They don't even finish the sentence, and they go to sleep, and then when they get up the next morning, their brain has carried on going, so that when they get back to their desk, they can carry on the story. So there's a lot to be said about the unconscious.
Yeah, the subconscious too. So that was the example that I brought along for the fiction book. The non-fiction, slightly different.
Yeah.
As you say, it's partly biographical, but there was a book festival I was hoping to go to years and years ago. And it was in a library, and the library assistant said to me, well, what kind of books are you drawn to then? So, you know, this book festival you want to go to. So I said, well, I'm quite drawn to romance. And they completely made me feel like I was nothing, because they did, even though they worked in the library, they completely felt that romance was a nothing genre.
Right.
And I wouldn't get anything out of it because the festival was very highbrow. I went to the festival, enjoyed it, got loads out of it, and it was a huge part of my career, actually, my learning.
Right.
But, you know, that kind of thing stayed with me. What if I never ever went to that festival because I thought I wasn't good enough?
Yeah. No, exactly.
Ridiculous.
Well, I when I moved to Northampton, I went to evening classes, and I say this as part of my WI talk, that I'd taken along a poem, and I've said this before in a session, that I have written poetry, but I never publish it. It will probably stay in my computer. And I took along a poem through the eyes of a 6-month-old baby. I don't write poetry, and I don't have children, but I just imagined being this 6-month-old boy, so it wasn't even the same gender. And his mum's making his goo, his brother's playing on the PlayStation, and I took this along, and it got pulled to pieces. And I actually say this in my WI talk. that was horrible. I'm not going to go back again. But the tutor had set the homework of writing a crime story. And after a couple of days, I just said to myself, get over yourself, write this story. And if you get pulled apart again next week, just grow a skin and deal with it.
What was those
But
people in it and kill them?
that could have put me off.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's these events. Andy's had a fairly rubbish week this week, and I said that if she was telling me the certain things that had happened, and I said, if you wrote that as a story, would people believe you? And it's just sometimes things happen, and you think, well, I have to either tone it down or miss something out, because certainly if you write it as fiction, nobody would believe you. Which takes me nicely on to Alastair. I think we may.
Look, I tell you what. Can you see me now?
No.
No,
Okay, I'll leave that. I was trying to join on the phone. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
I'm messing everyone up again.
No, that's all right. Don't worry. We can hear you. That's the main thing. Better
Thank
to
you.
hear you and not see you than not.
Thank you. I'm quite envious of everyone's backgrounds. Probably best you can't see mine because it's not that exciting. The backgrounds behind them, apart from Andy, no disrespect, who's quite a bit like mine. It's a bit like quite plain.
I'm a
Um,
part-timer.
That's okay.
I was going to put that off. Yeah, thank you. I suppose I straddle both sides. Because of the life I've led, I've had this privilege really of hearing testimonies from women who've been abused and when I got to retirement, I just felt, I just need to write about this because I've been privileged as
Mm,
just a Hertfordshire boy, to hear these stories from women, and it's a major issue around the world, and sadly always will be and always has been that women get abused, and some men, of course, but mainly women around the world, and because it was in Central Asia where I heard all this and experienced all this over several years, and it was nomadic. There's a bit of an angle there as well, the nomadic lifestyle and everything, and misogynistic, and it was cultural, really. I'm not actually blaming. It sounds. Don't judge me on this. I'm not actually blaming. People are brought up in that culture of women do the kind of work and men do the sort of hunting, if you like, hunting and fishing,
mm,
and they drink because there is very little else to do up in the high hills of Central Asia,
mm,
and I just felt that so I heard these kind of testimonies, and worst case, it's not all, not every family is like that, but worst case scenarios is that you know there's femicide and things like that, but which I've also written about in the two novels I've written so far. The current one's about trafficking, in the same. It's a trilogy basically, but I think having experienced things in my life which are quite uncomfortable to have experienced.
mm,
Although I was journalist trained, I was able to kind of leave it at home. I think, and my wife would testify to this, that in retirement, you kind of need to unburden yourself of some of the things that as British people, we try and keep hidden and in ourselves. And I think it's been quite a healthy thing for me to do to write about trauma.
mm,
And it's quite unusual, I think, for a guy to write about, women's issues, international issues. And of course, it's in this country as well, but it's everywhere around the world that's abuse of women. So that's, I suppose, domestic violence and you know the things that all the things around it, and exposure of it.
mm,
Because that's the other thing I just wanted to say that very briefly is that I write the stories in fictional form, so I kind of create the story around people's real life testimonies, and but they always have redemptive endings. So at the end of the day, there's good over evil. There is exposure, and there's the breakup of cartels and things like that. So there's a heavy fictional element to it, but based on raw truth.
sure. Did you find you could have more freedom writing it as fiction? That you could almost not dramatize feels a frivolous word to use,
Mhm.
but whether you could make it more dramatic, even more dramatic, because you were fictionalizing it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, the creative in me has made it perhaps more than it should have been, ought to have been. But however, I would like to think that I'm honoring the people whose testimonies I've kind of drawn my fictional story from, and pulled it all together by not over fictionalizing the horrors that they experienced. So I'm very conscious and I think alert to the because I've seen it and experienced it and heard it, and you know of the horrors and the pain that they've kind of been through. And I think I mentioned last time we spoke, you know, the book title of my second book is No One Hears You Scream, but Silence Will Be Heard. Now, no, you know, and that No One Hears You Scream is a direct quote from a woman who in the mountains of Central Asia,
I
who,
actually have your book here.
oh, bless you.
I was going
Yeah,
to
there
let you.
you
I
go.
was going to let you know I got it.
Oh, thank
But
you. Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
title. That's the
Yeah, thank you. No one hears you. But the silence will be heard is the redemptive bit. You know, we hear you, I hear you. The journalist I've created, as a fictional journalist who goes after these situations that women find themselves in nomadic cultures in mountainous regions of Central Asia, which I've been in and lived in in a small way.
yeah,
And so I feel that I can, you know, write authentically about the pain, but also the fact that there is always hope.
sure. It's nice that you say, because we'll be talking about the therapy of writing in a couple of weeks. But has anybody, because you said that it was something that you wanted to get out, that you'd experienced.
Mm.
Has anybody, have you had any feedback from anybody who said that they feel that you're finally, that they're not necessarily somebody who you wrote about, but
Mm.
has gone through the same thing,
Mm.
but has contacted you and said that they're so glad that you've shared this story?
No, but I've spoken to charities and domestic violence charities. I'm on to some now at the moment, and I think the biggest question, you know, I do not a lot, I do a fair bit of media, radio media, and I just and the question that always comes, you're a guy and you're writing about women's issues. How do you justify that? How do you know about this? How do you, and you have to go through the whole explanatory process of explaining to the listener that you've been privileged actually to hear these stories, and therefore you know, it's incumbent, I think, upon me to share them,
Sure, sure.
if that makes
Eric,
sense.
oh yeah, absolutely. Eric, has anybody sort of contacted you and said that it's reminded them of something, that something you've written has reminded them of something that they've gone through, or?
Not really. I've had people comment on how real they said that some of the scenes in the trenches felt based on documentaries and so forth, but not directly. I mean, you know, my stuff is very much grounded in the 1910s.
Yeah.
So, you know, so those people aren't around.
No.
But I'm hoping with the next book, maybe I'll get some of that because I am continuing with that alternate history blend. So is that, yeah, sorry. That's why the background's up.
Right. No, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay. Sarah, what sort of feedback have you had from people who've read your books? Because I say that there are 4 E's that we like when we're reading. We like to be educated, feel some emotion, certainly by the end of it, to be entertained and have some kind of escape. So that either it's helping us because our life is dull and it's really either cheering us up or something. Screen thing has gone off, or that we read for an escape that maybe our life is traumatic and we need something that's reassuring, or the opposite, we have an ordinary life and it would just be nice to have something that is a little bit more escapism.
Yeah, I think, well, from my novels, I mean, the ones that you can see are just a handful. I've got the best coloured ones there at the moment,
Right.
And the other ones are out of print mostly. But the fiction novels, excuse me, I've had a few people say that the using two of your E's, the emotion and the escapism, and obviously the entertainment, have been really interesting. I've got a novel that's that one, Living and Loving in Texas, which is a bittersweet romance, and that takes place in the summer. And Dream State and the one that I'm currently writing both take place October to December, so both of them tend to be one half of the year.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of forward audiences towards whichever part of the year they want to have a decent read in. But yeah, that's kind of where they've been going with it. They want something emotive and entertaining that they can just read and forget about everything, which hopefully they can do. Can't really do that with the non-fiction, but you can get entertainment and information. I know it's not one of your E's, but I tend to feel like reading's either entertainment, escapism, or information, or education. There's always something of those things within, I think, probably all of my books, actually.
Sure.
But with the, because the non-fiction are not always creative writing. There's one up there about activities there, that one.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So again, if there's an opportunity to jump on something to do, to have a bit of escapism, but physically, then, you know, they're going to do that through that one. I'm not even sure I've answered you properly, to be
That's
fair.
okay.
I kind of went off on a tangent.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's always interesting because we never know, do we, when what kind of readers we're going to get, and unless they leave a review on Amazon, what they actually think of our writing. And we do pour so much of ourselves into it, even if it's not necessarily a story that we have taken from a life experience of our own. We get the ideas from somewhere, whether it's somebody else's comment or and something we've seen on TV.
Yeah.
And Andy, what would you say is the best thing that's happened, that's come out of this for you? Because obviously you're telling NASA's story.
Well, personally, I can't watch violence on TV or in films now, because now I know that people really do horrible things to other people and find it quite acceptable. I know it's all made up and it's not real, but it affects me personally, having sort of gone through the book and read it. But from the feedback I've had from the book, I think one of the most interesting bits of feedback was that, well, a friend who's a head teacher recently finished the book and said that from NASA's story, he's actually going to find a way of supporting children who've come into the country who are in his secondary school now, because he realizes how much they must have been through. So if that's I think that's when we started talking about legacies. You know, if that's a legacy of the book, that it helps and supports someone else, I'm more than happy that I've made a mark and I've made a change in other people's lives. So for me, that's the biggest thing.
And you're writing a follow-up, aren't you, at the moment?
Yes, yeah. In fact, you said about writing 300 words a day. Sometimes I get a whole 1,000 words down. Not saying they're good 1,000 words, and I do go back to them and have a look at them. But
Yeah.
there's something happens, and I sort of get it all down there, and then I look at it and sometimes move it around the book and rearrange it. And I'm about probably a quarter of the way through the book at the moment. But it's a strange thing because I don't know what the ending is. I don't know what the outcome is because it's happening while I'm writing it. So will he or won't he is the big question.
Right.
And I don't know the answer.
No.
So yeah. you know, I might have to change some tense forms by the time the outcome happens.
Right.
But
Um,
yeah.
Eric, have there been things in your writing career where you think, oh, this is great, but I know this is true, but I can't put it in because nobody would believe me?
Not really. I mean, so in the first book, there is a critical scene where it sounds ridiculous to say it out loud in a group like this, where what you people are what you guys are talking about. The Martians they're in the trenches at the Somme, which I love talking to people from the other side of the Atlantic because they actually know what the Somme is. But my grandfather was there, a German draftee.
Mm.
And in real life, he saved his unit at Mametz. It was one of the few areas where the British Army broke through, was at Mametz Wood, and he saved his unit because he knew which way to run. He had laid out the lights in the trenches. And I sort of reproduced that scene, but with Martians attacking.
Okay.
And it sounds ridiculous that this guy was running and people following him, got out of the trenches.
Mm.
But it's what happened. It's actually in Martin Middlebrook's book, The First Day on the Somme, which was pretty huge in the 70s.
Mm.
I did worry about that, but nobody commented on it. But then again, I had Martians walking around with heat rays, so we were already kind of ridiculous.
So,
In my next book, I'm talking a lot about witch burnings in Germany in the 16th century, and I've read some pretty unbelievable stuff. And I am wondering how much of that I'm going to put in there.
right.
Thousands upon thousands of women.
Yeah.
It was just, and you don't, over here we only think about Salem, Massachusetts, and I think it was maybe 15 women, maybe 20 in a short period of time. And then you read what happened a century earlier in Europe, and you're like, oh my God, the Americans were amateurs.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Sarah, obviously, you know the I say expert. I don't want to use the word expert too lightly. You write books about writing, so you know sort of the level of reader expectation, how they could think, well, no, that wouldn't happen. And I'm sure all of us would say, as we're writers and readers, that it's made us more critical of what we read as to what we would believe is realistic and unrealistic. Do you have sort of something that you think of that maybe you come up with an idea and think, oh, I'd love to, that would suit that book, but nobody would believe it, although perhaps you think it has happened or could happen? You just feel that it's one step too far.
In the non-fiction world, is it in my helping other people write creatively? I think there's no reason to not write any of that stuff, because even if you've written it and it doesn't sound believable, there's ways to make it sound believable through editing. So, just get it out of your head and write it. Why stop doing it just in case something might not work? It's fiction. It's let's allow it to be, and don't write with lots of boundaries surrounding it. Don't restrict yourself. Just get it all down, get it out of your head, and why not? Play with it, see where it goes, follow all the tangents. I'd love it. It's brilliant stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's therapy. Even if I've said this before in these, that I had an ex-next door. I don't know why I'm pointing in that direction, but I had a neighbour in Northampton who'd promised that his extension was only going to be the same as everybody else's, and it ended up looking like a prison from the back. He'd bought next door, so I thought, and all the other neighbours had gone out one level, just a conservatory and extended kitchen, but he decided to go up into the loft. So he had on both houses, luckily at the back, he had both houses wide and 3 stories high, just as a square box. And so if I needed a shopkeeper, I'd imagine him as my shopkeeper and then kill him off in various nasty ways.
Yeah.
Alistair, have you come across anything in your career where you think perhaps you'd either tone it down or think it's possibly not suitable for fiction?
No, and I don't think in fictional terms, I agree with the previous speakers. You can push the boundaries really as fiction, but truth is stranger than fiction. And because I was surprised to have experienced the truth of bride kidnapping, for example, in Central Asia. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know it existed. Maybe I was a bit naive, but bride kidnapping doesn't happen everywhere in the world, but it is a Silk Road. Um, uh, Kind of it's something that happens, and historically it's happened over the years because of nomadic loneliness and isolation. Again, I'm not defending it, but because I've managed to speak to so many survivors of bride kidnapping, who thinks those words would come out of someone from Hertfordshire like that? Just, in this group, as been said earlier, but that's kind of what I've been able to write about, and it's shocking, but it's also real, and it's truthful, and it's illegal, but it still goes on because the men come from the mountains. As I say, they're nomadic. There's men, and they come into the cities. There's only 5 cities in Kyrgyzstan, for example, 5 primary cities. They come into those cities, and because it's 85% mountainous, and they snatch brides. And often they're 15-year-olds. They're sort of 14-year-old schoolgirls. They snatch them off the streets, never to be seen again. And so why wouldn't I write about that? I suppose, in answer to your question, why wouldn't I write about something that's truthfully happening, has happened for over many years, is now illegal, but still happens?
Sure.
Can I just say something there, Alistair?
Mm,
Um, the culture that you were embedded in and are writing about is very alien to us in the West,
mm,
just as the living in the Assad regime is
mm.
also very alien to us. And I think
Yes.
that's a very important factor in
Mm,
both our writing, that we're actually highlighting the fact that um, what we find unacceptable is the norm somewhere else. I'm
yes.
not saying that it's okay, but
No.
it's the way people live their lives on a day-to-day basis and
Yeah.
think that that's the right way to treat other people.
It's survival in many ways. It's
So,
for nomadic people. It's kind of survival. How do they? They're still hunting and fishing. The fish in the mountains in Central Asia, they are just hung on the line and then they're sold to passers-by. And it's just extraordinary. Who would have thought that? We go to our supermarkets and buy packaged fish and whatever, and fresh fish and whatever. But fishing is a way of keeping alive. And, hunting is a way of staying alive, really. Raw hunting for, uh, boar, if you like. And, and, you know, the, the, I don't want to say this without trying to justify anything, but, men, need women in their lives. And these men in nomadic, that's how they get them. Not every nomadic community, but I think because I've seen in a congested environment lots and heard lots of testimonies of those women, it all seems like quite overwhelming to me and something to be spoken about. So I agree with you. It's just their way of life, really, the way they operate and have done for centuries.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
Genghis
yeah.
Khan.
Alistair, in your journalistic career,
Mm,
do you think, because now we can just see, we can Google or
mm,
search
mm,
online for anything. Do you
mm,
think that as times have changed, that we become almost desensitized? We see so much happening, so many bad
mm,
things happening,
mm, mm,
that it's almost, we watch a film and it's almost, if we're watching something that although we know is true
mm,
online or on the TV, that it's almost, we've seen that so many times. It's the thing I'm thinking of is with the boats coming over from mostly from France,
mm, mm,
where it's another statistic. And yet, if we see, there was I think I can't remember whether he was a rescuer I think he was wearing a uniform. I can't remember exactly what, whether he was military, carrying a boy out of the water who died. And
Mm.
then I think we become less desensitized
Yeah.
to it
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
becomes human, when
Mm.
there's a face and a name to it rather than
Mm.
just a statistic.
Yes, absolutely. And in Auschwitz, for example, they've got a preserved area where names are carved out, stones where names are carved onto them, individuals. Now, 6 million people, we're talking about who died in the Holocaust.
Mm.
But when you see a name scribbled out, that becomes very personal, doesn't it?
Mm.
And so no one hears you scream, for example, is one person's testimony of her life. She's probably dead now. Um, that quote was from 10 years ago. And
Mm.
and so I don't think it's wrong to write about and to shock in order to gain attention, as long as shock is not done for the wrong purposes. I think shocking an audience or shocking a reader is is worthy if um, if you're doing it for the right reasons. So I'm trying to, I don't want to justify anything I write about as
No.
acceptable, but I do want people to realise that these sort of practices can go on. And as I say, bride kidnapping, femicide, domestic violence,
Mm.
brutalisation, uh, alcoholism, which goes on all over the world, of course, and
Mm.
etc., etc. All the issues of the day, plus in Central Asia and probably in other parts of the world um, that I've experienced. So therefore, that is writing from real life experience. So that's what I think we're where we are.
Mm. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
thinking
there's
with
yeah. I was going to say, in Malaysia, um,
Mm,
babies born out of wedlock have been thrown away in bins in plastic
yeah,
bags
yeah,
because of the shame.
yeah,
And, it's for religious piety that they don't want to bring shame on their families, and they sort of
mm,
that's why they kill their babies.
yeah,
And I mean, to us that's horrific, but it's
mm,
actually it happens, but it's a bit taboo over
mm,
there.
mm.
yes,
It's something that we don't hear about, but it's quite a feature of
mm,
that society.
mm,
And the news that we look at on TV and listen to on the radio, it's the news that somebody has chosen to give us. And after it's been a sensation and so many thousand people have been killed, the news goes somewhere else. And
mm,
there's still the
mm,
devastation and the deaths and people
yeah,
picking up their lives in
mm,
rubble.
mm,
But they're still there, but we forget about them and we move on to the next disaster and the next this and the next that.
mm,
And I think we do sort of it's out there and it's out of our range of experience, so it doesn't really affect us. We really don't feel what it
mm,
must be like to be in
mm.
those situations.
Well, we're
So I think
sanitized, aren't we, from it?
yeah,
And sorry, just say one more thing. My very recent research on I'm writing this third book about trafficking and of girls, and there's something called internal trafficking, where they're not trafficked over borders in Central Asia, but they're trafficked in-house for sexual purposes and servitude as well. But they're trafficked to have babies, and the babies are then sold across borders for money
yeah,
to people who maybe can't conceive, maybe who've got money and can't conceive them or want to have children, and it's a thing. And who knew? Well, I didn't really know that until because I haven't spoken to any of those survivors. I think it's moderately more new than the bride kidnapping stuff, but it's it's something that's I think worth writing about, actually, worth exposing in many ways. Even though my books aren't exposure, they're redemptive. But that's kind of what I'm to write about. But I agree with you. It's it's shocking, and we are sanitized from it unless we learn about it.
Eric, when you were writing inspired by your grandfather's times, did you learn anything new that you didn't know beforehand when you started writing your novels?
A bit, yes. And actually it was I was researching to write about him that I ended up using a lot of that toward the book, like the specific part area of the Somme where his unit was overrun.
Mm.
The book he was interviewed for that I remember barely as a kid didn't go into that kind of detail. There's a lot more detail about that now, specifics about how the troops lived in the trenches and all that, and a lot of World War One facts that I did uncover. And then a bit about life in New York City in the 1910s, because I have another storyline where the character in the U.S. is a bit more modeled after me that I learned a lot about. And of course, the fire that took down part of Coney Island that I ended up fitting in there.
Mm.
I read a lot about that. I'm just going to go back to what you said earlier when you first started talking to Alastair the first time, or beginning of his last talk. The two things I thought of was, what is it? 6 million is 6 million people dead is a statistics. One person dead is a tragedy. Is what is a saying over in the U.S. where you have to really personalize it to make people care. If you know about 6 million people dead or however many Palestinians were just recently killed, it just goes right over your head. But then, one of the important things that journalism does is they bring the camera there and they're like, no, this is what's happening. Look at this. And also in the US, I was too young to remember it, but I know that there's a very famous photo of a little girl running away from a napalm strike in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That had a huge impact on America's view of the war, because they just didn't know what was happening. And then that photo of that little girl, I know, made a massive impact over here on the opinion toward that war. And that's what you have to do sometimes. It feels lurid, it feels voyeuristic, but it can be how you reach people.
Now you shock with truth.
Right.
Sarah, how do you balance your life with writing? Are you pretty good at saying, right, this is my job. I'm going to do X thousand words today, or do you have set time?
I am. I'm pretty disciplined. I'm in my office, as you can probably tell. If I have got a project on, which I do at the moment, then I'm focusing all of my attention on writing that book. If I'm ghostwriting for somebody, then all of my attention will go on to that. I've got several books lined up, so getting an income in between those books is kind of important, as you can imagine. So if I have either come to the end of writing my own book, I can put that to one side and let that just be for a while. That detachment, that distance is useful. I also proofread for a publisher or a couple of publishers. And that's nonfiction. So I can focus on that, proofread that, and then my mind is in a completely different state. So I can go back to it afterwards, almost like a palate cleanser, and then focus back on it again. But whatever project I'm working on, that is my overall focus. If I'm proofreading for other novelists, and it's not always the same genre as my own. In fact, I write in a lot of different genres, so it doesn't really matter to me. It helps to know that I can focus on that, and then when I do go back to my own stuff, that's that. But whatever time I start, it might not be 9 in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I might start at 10, or I might start at 8, but then I might finish at 4. I might carry on till 6. After dinner, if I'm writing fiction, between dinner and going to bed, I usually go back to work, and either write or edit. But I generally do fiction at night, and I do non-fiction during the day. That just seems to have been my process over my career. But yeah, I'm here to work, and I love my job. I absolutely adore it. Try and take it away from me, and bad things will happen to you. So yeah, I'm very protective over it.
Story there. There's a story in that one. And I'm sure deadlines help, because if you're, especially with ghostwriting, or you've publishers relying on you, and
I love a deadline. You know where you stand with a deadline, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely love it. A healthy deadline. A healthy deadline. Yeah, there's no point in being silly with yourself and making things harder. But no, I enjoy a deadline, because if somebody's giving you a deadline, then I tend to bring it a week nearer, so I can work to that one, and I've got wiggle room should I need it. And if I don't, I'm like, yay, I did it. But yeah, I mean, I'm very disciplined with my work, and there's actually only a few things that get in the way with that. If I've got so tired I can't think straight, if I'm ill in any way, if I've forgotten to eat, because hyperfocus goes in so hard that I often forget to eat. My husband, he also works from home, different industry, and he'll come in and say to me, have you eaten? I'm like, no, completely forgot. What time is it? Oh my God, 5 hours have gone. That's why I feel so horrible. Yeah, just isn't. Yeah. So thankfully he's there. So if he wasn't, I'd probably think I'll just die at this keyboard with a skeleton. But no, I'm very disciplined, because I adore my job, my career. So if it was hard work or something, but I love a literary challenge. Who doesn't? It's great fun.
Well, if anybody ever asks me to do something, I say, when do you need it by? And they go, oh, whenever you like. I said, no, give me a date. I have to have it done by and then I tend to work deadline to deadline to deadline. Alastair, you're retired now. Do you still do you set yourself I'd like to do this, or?
Well, I do work to a deadline. I've got 3 grandchildren who we help out with. They're very young. They're 6, 4, and 1, and they're by 2 different daughters. So we wanted to, 2 days of the week are kind of. My wife helps as well, so I don't want to over egg that pudding, but they do take up time, and that's a good thing. And well-being. I was interested just to hear then, that about the writing for 5 hours non-stop. If that, but I always try and get out and walk during the day if I'm writing. I've been writing all day today, because I think well-being is also important to. Otherwise, I think you can get too sort of desk centric, really, and you can almost burn your thought processes out. And just one thing I do, I always try and bring a book out in November in time for the Christmas market. Or the last 2, I say I've only got 3, but the last 2 I've brought out in time for Christmas, and that's been really a healthy time, December and January. But this one I'm going to bring out in October, and that's brought my deadline forward and made me focus my mind a bit better, because I've just discovered really that International Domestic Violence Month is in October, and I think that so I'm going to try and capitalise on which sounds a bit crude, given the subject matter, but there will be an interest, I think, given that I'm writing about that trafficking and domestic violence, and there is a whole month dedicated to it in the UK and internationally as well. So I've actually brought my deadline forward, which I think is going to be helpful for me.
And you're going to be at Self Pub Fest on the 4th of October.
Yes, I am.
Hopefully,
thank you very much.
Hopefully
Yes, absolutely.
Have that
yes.
ready for then.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's
You're
good.
very welcome.
You got my email, but so it's. I think deadlines can definitely help and focus the mind.
Eric, you're sort of newly you've got newfound time to write now. How are you finding it? Are you quite disciplined at?
Medium disciplined. It's still new. It's like a month. My routine is I probably do my best work first thing. So get up, make a cup of coffee, sit down. No computer, because I don't draft on a computer. I draft on a digital typewriter thing, and get in at least 2 25-minute sprints, much to my dog's dismay. She sits here and stares at me. If I do that, that's probably good for 800 to 1200 words for the day, and I know I can not feel bad at the end of the day.
Mm.
The problem I'm grappling with is around 10 p.m. suddenly ideas show up again.
Oh,
And if I don't watch it, I'll be up at 1, which means I'm not going to get up first thing in the morning, and that's what knocks me out of the loop.
no.
But usually in the evening, like last night, I worked, I still do some dog training, and for some reason, I on the way drive home from the store, ideas about this one character came back, and it's like, oh no, is it enough to write them down, or do I need to go in there and do some drafting?
Mm.
What I have done, I announced a Patreon yesterday where I'm going to be uploading a chapter from this book a week. That's the deadline I need. Um, Very much when I was in the military, I was unbearable if there was nothing going on, but I was the person they wanted when things got crazy. Something some weird personality quirk
Right, right.
that I need that deadline too. Even though I love the Douglas Adams quote about the
Yes, it
whooshing
works.
sound, I do need a deadline, and that's the problem with being an independent author is, I've already paid for an editor. I know I have to have the book to her Labor Day weekend. That's the kind of thing I have to do to myself is
Yeah.
hand somebody a couple $1,000s and be like, yeah, I don't want to waste that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Andy,
yeah.
do you find, because obviously you're collaborating
Yeah.
with NASA, do you find then that your time is when his time is as well? So he's
Um,
free a certain.
Yeah, sometimes it's really frustrating because with his PTSD and with other things that are happening, he's sometimes very distracted. And I'm sort of twiddling my thumbs waiting for the next time. And I've now got an hour's recordings that I'm now putting through and putting onto paper
Mm.
and onto the computer and working on. But I swim a lot and I go and do 3K in the mornings.
Because you
So
do
I
the outside swim, don't you?
no, no,
Oh,
I do, but I mostly swim in, in the swimming
okay.
pool, and it's really zen. I just plow up and down, 120 lengths. Um, I get my best ideas while I'm doing it. I'm completely distracted. Yeah, that's good for me. It's good, it's a good escapism because I think if I sat and looked at a computer screen, I wouldn't do anything at all. I'd just get the words would jump around and I'd lose myself. So
Um,
yeah, I do need to get out. I cycle a lot, and again, that's good fresh air and sort of thinking time. And then I do a couple of bits of volunteering in the week, and then I fit writing the book around that and my family, and it works, but it comes in bursts. You
right.
know, you know, blogging's regular,
Mm,
magazines are regular, the book fits in between everything else.
right.
But it takes a lot of my thinking time up.
So presumably there's no deadline for book two. It's as and when you're
It
sort of
it
playing it by ear.
hasn't sort of reached a conclusion.
Mm,
So and I mean, so much is happening in the Middle East at the moment. Syria is the only country I think that hasn't sort of been bombed by either America or Israel
mm,
recently. It's got a growth of 5% GDP. It's doing all right. It's muddling through, but it's still not sorted. And I think it'll take generations before they overcome the bitterness and the loss and the heartache that they've had over sort of the 13 years of war that they've suffered.
mm,
It's it we I always compare it to the First World War in Britain. We had a population of 40 million, 880,000 or people died. We had about 2 million injured, and it's still affecting our lives now, isn't it? We still talk about our our history and World War One. Um, Syria, population of 23 million, half of them displaced, missing, imprisoned, killed.
mm.
Um, how many generations will it take to overcome what's happened there? it's an enormity.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think something Sarah said, I think we all know this anyway, how lucky we are in our doing what we do. Some of us more full time than and some of us semi-retired to write and then set up a book festival, goodie bags. However, after Sunday, I shall be going back to my writing. Editing. I've got the sixth Henry dog detective story come back.
What's your routine, Morgan? What's your routine?
Well, tail end of last year, before I came up with this idea, so October time, before I came up with the idea of Self Pub Fest, I'd put the word out to all my editing clients that I was going to only take, I say contemporary, but sort of 1960s onwards, because 1975 is officially historical now. So 1960s onwards, crime, women's fiction, and non-fiction about writing. So that's what I write, those three. And that I had other people who would take everything else. So I put all that detail on my blog, on my website, to so then people could go to whoever was suited. And then a week later, I came up with the idea of Self Pub Fest. But my plan was to not book anything before noon. So part of the reason why Mondays are noon now, so that I could write. And regardless of what time I got up, if I got up at 6, I'd if I could write until 11:30. If I got up at 9, I would still write until 11:30. So that is my plan. After Sunday is to spend the mornings writing. So, but I need to be better at going. Just sit, and I've gradually been. I've got 2 computers. This is my right hand one, and I've got one over here, which was going to be and is going to be my writing only. So I just have Word on it, and that will be my writing and editing computer, with everything else on this one, so that I'm not tempted to go, well, just look this up, and the dog house, somebody's adopting a dog on from Wood Green Animal Shelter, and aren't they sweet, and their backstory, but there we go. So yes, that's the plan. Thank you, Alastair. That's the plan, is to write in the mornings, because I'm an Eric. I have a dog, and so I get up early and walk the dog, and then come back and write. But he's 14 and a half, so I have to wake him up these days. So I could write, and then I could probably write until 11:30, and then wake him up, and then go out for a walk. So that would be fine. So that's the plan. So there we go. So we shall carry on doing what we're doing and loving it, as we can tell. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Alastair. And see you on Sunday, Andy.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. And have a lovely holiday, Alastair, because you're away, aren't you?
Yes, I'm sorry that we are. We need a break.
No, there's no problem at all. So we'll see you again, Eric and Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.